Picture the deafening roar of 5,000 voices reverberating through the stone arches of the Colosseum, a chorus of anticipation and bloodlust that shakes the sweltering Roman air. The iron gates creak open with a mournful groan, revealing the sun-scorched arena within. In the center, a condemned man clad only in a tattered loincloth steps, trembling into the blinding light. The sand beneath his bare feet, stained rusty brown from the morning spectacles, seems to pulse with the memory of blood already spilled. Across the vast amphitheater, another gate rattles upward, and a North African lion bounds forth its tawny mane, glinting in the sunlight, eyes locking onto its prey. In the imperial box, the emperor raises his hand, then lets it fall with a decisive flourish. The crowd erupts. The spectacle begins. This was the Colosseum, the beating heart of Rome's obsession with death as entertainment, where punishment was not merely justice, but a grand theatrical performance that enthralled an empire. As a historian, I invite you to step into this arena to feel the weight of its history, to witness the chilling ingenuity of a civilization that turned execution into art. The damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, was more than a death sentence. It was a meticulously crafted drama that wove together justice, religion, and raw spectacle, captivating Romans from every walk of life. To understand Rome's darkest punishments, we must begin here in the shadow of the Colosseum's towering arches, where the line between cruelty and entertainment blurred into oblivion. Inaugurated in 80 CE under Emperor Titus, the Colosseum was a marvel of engineering and a monument to Rome's imperial might. With a capacity for 5,000 spectators, its elliptical arena was a stage unlike any other, designed to showcase the empire's power over life and death. Beneath its sandy floor lay the hypogeum, a labyrinthine network of tunnels, chambers, and trapdoors that transformed executions into theatrical spectacles. 32 animal pens and 80 vertical shafts allowed beasts and prisoners to emerge, as if by magic, rising through trapdoors to gasps of awe from the crowd. The historian Cassius Dio records that during the Colosseum's opening games, 9,000 animals, lions, bears, leopards, and more, were slaughtered alongside countless condemned souls in a 100-day orgy of violence. These were not mere killings, they were performances choreographed to keep the audience spellbound. The damnatio ad bestias was the pinnacle of this deadly theater, reserved for slaves, prisoners of war, and the vilest criminals. Unlike gladiatorial combat, which offered a chance of survival, this punishment was a death sentence played out for maximum drama. Condemned men and women faced ravenous beasts in scenarios that were often staged as mythological reenactments, blending horror with cultural resonance. A prisoner might be dressed as Icarus, only to be torn apart by bears instead of plummeting from the sky. Another cast as Hercules faced a lion without weapons, his fate sealed before he stepped onto the sand. The poet Martial, in his Book of Spectacles, celebrated these scenes. What was mere fable on the stage becomes reality in our arena. For the Romans, these executions were not just punishments, but a collision of myth and reality, a chance to see their stories come to bloody life. The Colosseum's design amplified this spectacle. Its tiered seating ensured every spectator, from senators to plebeians, had a view of the carnage. The crowd was not a passive audience, but an active participant, their cheers and jeers shaping the rhythm of the violence. Emperor Nero, ever the showman, took this to grotesque extremes. According to Suetonius, he once forced a condemned man to play Daedalus fitted with makeshift wings and ordered to fly from a platform above the arena. The man plummeted to his death, splattering blood on the emperor's viewing box, a grim parody of the myth. In another instance, Nero staged a man as Orpheus, sent into the arena with a lyre promised that his music might soothe the beasts. For a fleeting moment, the animals seemed to pause, lulled by the melody, before tearing him apart, a cruel twist on the myth, where Orpheus charmed nature itself. The crowd roared not in horror, but in delight at the irony. These spectacles were not spontaneous, but carefully orchestrated. The Roman state invested immense resources to ensure their success. Specialized hunters, known as venatores, scoured the empire's frontiers, from the forests of Germania to the deserts of Africa, to capture exotic animals. Lions from Numidia, bears from Caledonia, and even rhinos from distant lands were shipped to Rome, their rarity adding to the allure. Emperor Trajan, celebrating his Dacian victories in 107 CE, staged games lasting 123 days, during which 11,000 animals and thousands of prisoners perished. Martial described one particularly vivid scene: a female criminal cast as Pasiphae was torn apart by a Caledonian bear, the crowd cheering the creative cruelty as if it were high art. To the Romans, this was not barbarism, but a civic duty, a shared ritual that reinforced the social order. The emotional weight of these events was profound. Imagine the condemned standing alone in the arena, the roar of the crowd drowning out their pleas. The sand, still warm with the blood of those who came before, offered no comfort. The beasts starved. 4 days were not just predators, but instruments of divine justice, their ferocity seen as proof of the gods' wrath. For the spectators, the experience was intoxicating. The philosopher Seneca, despite his Stoic principles, admitted to feeling more greedy, more ambitious, more voluptuous, and even more cruel after attending the games. Yet he returned, as did thousands of Romans, drawn by the primal thrill of watching life and death collide. The Colosseum was a mirror reflecting Rome's values, power, spectacle, and an unflinching willingness to confront mortality. The logistics of these executions reveal the Romans' chilling efficiency. The hypogeum was a marvel of its own, staffed by slaves and engineers who operated pulleys and winches to orchestrate the drama. Animals were hoisted from their pens, prisoners raised through trapdoors, all timed to maximize surprise and excitement. During Emperor Probus's reign in the 3rd century CE, an artificial hill was erected in the Circus Maximus, planted with real trees and populated with 100 ostriches, 100 stags, and countless other animals. Condemned criminals were released to hunt. These beasts promised freedom if they survived, a promise few could claim. The crowd watched not with pity, but with fascination as the arena became a microcosm of Rome's dominion over nature and man. This blending of punishment and entertainment was no accident. The poet Juvenal famously remarked that the Roman populace craved only bread and circuses panem et circenses, a biting critique of how spectacles distracted the masses from political discontent. Emperor Augustus formalized this system, designating over 135 days a year for ludi, public games that included executions. By the 4th century CE, these events were so integral to Roman life that they structured the daylighter entertainments in the morning, executions at midday, and gladiatorial combat in the afternoon. Death was not an interruption, but the main event, a ritual that bound the community together in shared awe and terror. Yet amidst the cruelty, there were moments of unexpected humanity. During Emperor Claudius's reign, an elephant execution went awry when the beast recognized its condemned keeper and refused to kill him, trumpeting in protest. Moved by this display of loyalty, the crowd demanded the man's pardon, and Claudius reluctantly complied. Such moments were rare, but reveal the complex emotions at play in the arena, where even the most hardened spectators could be swayed by glimpses of compassion in the face of horror. As historians, we must grapple with the paradox of Rome's spectacles. The Colosseum was a testament to the empire's ingenuity, a place where architecture and engineering met to create unforgettable drama. Yet it was also a graveyard, its sands soaked with the blood of those deemed unworthy of Rome's mercy. The damnatio ad bestias was not just a punishment, but a cultural institution, a reminder that Rome's glory was built on the ability to control life and death with equal precision. To walk the Colosseum's ruins today is to feel the echoes of those roars, to sense the weight of a civilization that found beauty in brutality. In this arena of death, Rome revealed its darkest truth, that justice, for all its grandeur, was inseparable from spectacle. Imagine the flickering glow of flames casting grotesque shadows across the stone walls of Nero's gardens, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning pitch and human flesh. The crowd gathered under a starless Roman night watches in mesmerized silence as a row of human figures coated in wax writhe in agony, their screams swallowed by the crackle of fire. These are not mere executions, they are performances orchestrated to illuminate the emperor's power and the terrible fate of those who defy it. In ancient Rome, fire was more than a tool of destruction. It was a purifier, a divine force wielded to cleanse the city of its sins while entertaining its citizens. As a historian, I invite you to peer into this inferno to feel the heat of Rome's darkest justice, where the flames of Vivicamburium, burning alive, revealed the empire's complex dance of retribution, religion, and spectacle. Fire held a sacred place in Roman culture, revered as the domain of Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and Vulcan, god of the forge. To the Romans, it was both a life-giving force and a merciless destroyer capable of purifying the soul or obliterating the body. This duality made it the perfect instrument for punishing crimes that polluted the social order: arson, sacrilege, or betrayal of sacred vows. Vivicamburium. The act of burning alive was not a quick death, but a meticulously crafted torture designed to prolong suffering and maximize its impact on the audience. Unlike a swift beheading, this punishment turned execution into a public ritual where the flames themselves became actors in a theater of cruelty. The most infamous practitioner of this fiery horror was Emperor Nero, whose reign marked a turning point in the theatricality of Roman punishments. Following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, which consumed much of the city, Nero faced accusations of arson. To deflect blame, he targeted the nascent Christian community, accusing them of the crime. According to the historian Tacitus, Nero's response was a spectacle of unparalleled cruelty. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired. These human torches, coated in wax or pitch to burn slowly and brightly, illuminated Nero's gardens on the Vatican Hill, their agonized silhouettes casting a haunting glow as the emperor drove his chariot among them, playing executioner, spectator, and performer in one grotesque act. The emotional weight of such a scene is almost unbearable to contemplate. Picture a Christian prisoner bound to a stake, their bodies slick with flammable pitch, the crowd's anticipation palpable as the first torch is lit. The flames creep upward, not consuming instantly, but licking at the flesh, prolonging the torment as the victim's cries pierce the night. For the Romans, this was not mere cruelty, but a symbolic act. Fire cleansed the pollution of the crime, restoring balance to a society offended by the act of arson or heresy. Yet the spectacle also served a darker purpose: to entertain the crowd. Accustomed to the Colosseum's bloody games, found in these burnings a new kind of thrill, a fusion of moral righteousness and primal fascination with suffering. The Vestal Virgins, guardians of Rome's sacred flame, faced Vivicamburium. When they broke their vows of chastity, a crime seen as a betrayal of the gods themselves. The case of Cornelia, a chief Vestal, condemned in 91 CE under Emperor Domitian, is particularly haunting. Despite her protestations of innocence recorded by Pliny the Younger, Cornelia was led to her fate with stoic dignity. "How can Caesar think me unchaste when he has conquered and triumphed under my ministrations?" she cried, her voice steady even as she faced the flames. Whether burned alive or entombed, a punishment sometimes substituted for Vestals to avoid direct divine pollution, her fate underscored the sacred weight of fire in Roman justice. The flames were not just a punishment, but a ritual purifying the city of the stain her alleged crime had left. The mechanics of Vivicamburium reveal the Romans' chilling precision. Executioners were skilled in controlling the fire's intensity to extend suffering. Victims might be suspended over low flames, roasted on a metal grid called a criticula, or placed in a bronze bull, a device borrowed from the Greeks, where the condemned were cooked alive inside a hollow statue, their screams amplified to sound like the bellowing of a beast. The Roman playwright Plautus, in his comedy The Prisoners, referenced this torture with grim humor as a character threatens a cook with being roasted more slowly than a duck in a cold oven. Even in jest, the reference betrays how deeply these punishments permeated Roman culture, their horror woven into the fabric of daily life. In the Roman colony of Lugdunum, modern Lyon, France, in 177 CE, the Christian martyr Blandina endured a particularly harrowing execution. Roasted on an iron chair over carefully controlled flames, she remained conscious and defiant, her faith unshaken as she spoke through the ordeal. Witnesses recorded her resilience, noting that she seemed to transcend her suffering, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure even the most unimaginable pain. For the Romans, however, her death was a spectacle, a chance to reaffirm their authority over those who challenged their religious and social order. The flames associated with Vesta's sacred hearth were believed to cleanse the community of the pollution caused by such defiance, even as they entertained the masses. The jurist Ulpian, writing in the early 3rd century CE, classified death by fire as summa supplicia, the ultimate punishment, recommending it for arsonists, poisoners, and practitioners of magic. During the reign of Marcus Aurelius, a self-proclaimed prophet named Alexander, who incited a riot, was burned alive in the Roman Forum on a metal seat heated until it glowed red. The crowd watched, not with pity, but with fascination, as his body contorted. In the heat, each moment of agony, a testament to Rome's power to punish. The historian Cassius Dio noted that such punishments were designed to mirror the essence of the crime, ensuring that the penalty reflected the offense in a way that resonated with the audience. Yet, as with all Roman spectacles, Vivicum was as much about politics as it was about justice. Emperors used these fiery executions to demonstrate their authority and win public favor. By staging elaborate burnings, they positioned themselves as protectors of Rome's moral and divine order, their power illuminated by the flames. Nero's human torches, for example, were not just a punishment, but a political statement, deflecting blame for the fire and reinforcing his dominance. The crowd, complicit in their cheers, became part of the spectacle, their approval cementing the emperor's legitimacy. The psychological impact of these executions was profound. For the condemned, the knowledge that their suffering would be a public performance added a layer of humiliation to their pain. For the spectators, the sight of a human body consumed by flames was both horrifying and mesmerizing, a reminder of the fragility of life and the might of Rome. Even hardened, Romans accustomed to the Colosseum's bloodshed occasionally felt pity, not for the innocence of the victims, as Tacitus notes, but because their deaths seemed to serve one man's cruelty rather than the public good. This tension between justice and excess reveals the complex emotions that fire punishments evoked. As historians, we must confront the paradox of Rome's fiery justice. The flames that purified also destroyed, and the spectacles that united the community in shared awe also exposed its capacity for cruelty. The site of Nero's burnings, the Vatican Hill, would centuries later become the location of St. Peter's Basilica, a sacred monument built on the ashes of martyrdom. In this transformation, we see Rome's legacy, a civilization that wielded fire to assert its power, yet whose punishments sowed the seeds of its own moral reckoning. The flames of Vivicum burned bright, but they illuminated not just the arena, but the soul of an empire, revealing its unrelenting pursuit of order through terror. The air hangs heavy with the stench of sweat and blood, as a condemned slave, shoulders bowed under the weight of a wooden beam, stumbles along the Via Appia. The jeers of the crowd pierce his ears, their faces a blur of contempt and morbid curiosity. Stripped naked, flogged until his back is a lattice of raw flesh, he drags the patibulum, the crossbeam of his doom, toward a fate so horrific it was rarely inflicted on Roman citizens. This is crucifixion, Rome's most infamous punishment, a spectacle of shame and suffering reserved for slaves, pirates, and traitors. As a historian, I invite you to walk this grim path, to feel the terror of a penalty that turned death into a prolonged public agony, a warning etched in blood along Rome's greatest roads. Crucifixion was not merely execution, it was a calculated theater of humiliation. The condemned were forced to carry the crossbeam through crowded streets, their shame laid bare before the city. At the execution site, they were nailed or roped to a cross, left to die slowly from exhaustion and asphyxiation. The process could take days, each breath a struggle as the body sagged, muscles failing under the strain. Roman executioners, masters of cruelty, used techniques to prolong suffering. A sedile, a small seat on the cross, prevented swift suffocation, stretching torment into hours or even days. The philosopher Seneca described the horror, "I see crosses. They're not just of one kind, but made in many ways, some with heads down, some impaling private parts, others stretching arms. Each variation was a new verse in Rome's hymn to pain. The emotional toll on the condemned was unimaginable. Picture a rebel slave, his wrists pierced by iron spikes, his body exposed to the elements and the crowd's scorn. The cross was not just a tool of death, but a stage for degradation, stripping the victim of dignity. The Latin word crux became a curse spat in anger, while abi and malum crucium, go to the bad cross, was a venomous insult akin to wishing someone to hell. For Romans, crucifixion was the ultimate deterrent, a message to those who dared defy the empire. Your rebellion will end in agony, your body a public monument to Rome's wrath. No event illustrates this better than the aftermath of Spartacus's rebellion in 71 BCE. After crushing the slave uprising, Marcus Licinius Crassus ordered 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the 200-kilometer stretch of the Via Appia from Rome to Capua. Travelers passed a forest of crosses, each bearing a dying man, their groans a chilling chorus. Plutarch notes the bodies remained until they rotted, a gruesome reminder of Rome's unyielding power. The sight was meant to terrify, to sear into the minds of all who passed that challenging Rome was a death sentence. Crassus's act was not just punishment, but propaganda, a gallery of suffering that proclaimed the empire's dominance. Even Julius Caesar, known for his clemency, wielded crucifixion with ruthless efficiency. As a young man kidnapped by pirates, he paid his ransom, but returned with a fleet to capture his captors. Though he slit their throats as a small mercy, he crucified them, their bodies left to sway in the Mediterranean breeze. This act, blending vengeance with spectacle, foreshadowed the calculated cruelty of the empire he would shape. Crucifixion was not just for rebels, but for any who threatened Rome's order, pirates, deserters, or those accused of treason against the state. The psychological impact extended beyond the condemned. Spectators, from senators to street vendors, were complicit in the ritual, their presence affirming Rome's authority. Yet the sight of a man writhing on a cross, his life ebbing away, could stir unease even in hardened hearts. Tacitus hints at this tension, noting that some Romans pitied the victims, not for their innocence, but for the excess of their suffering. Crucifixion was a mirror of Rome's soul, reflecting both its strength and its capacity for cruelty. As historians, we must grapple with crucifixion's legacy. It was a punishment so brutal that Roman citizens were largely exempt, its horror reserved for the marginalized. Yet its image endured, transforming from a symbol of shame to one of salvation with the rise of Christianity. The crosses along the Via Appia, once markers of Rome's triumph, became echoes of a new faith born in blood. In crucifixion, we see Rome at its most merciless, a civilization that turned death into a spectacle, its crosses casting long shadows. Over history, the Tiber River flows silently under the Cestian Bridge, its waters a mirror to Rome's unyielding justice. A crowd gathers, their murmurs rising like a storm, as a condemned man, bloodied from a beating with crimson rods, is dragged forward. His crime is unthinkable parricide, the murder of a parent, a betrayal of pietas, the sacred duty to family that binds Roman society. Sewn into a leather sack with a snarling dog, a screeching rooster, a chattering monkey, and a hissing viper, he is cast into the river's depths, denied earth, air, and light. This is the poena colle, a punishment so grotesque it chills the soul. As a historian, I beckon you to witness this ritual, to feel the weight of Rome's darkest justice, where the sack became a tomb of symbolic horror. The poena colle was no mere execution. It was a meticulously crafted spectacle, designed to sever the criminal from the very elements of existence. Rooted in Rome's earliest legal code, the 12 Tables, it was reserved for parricides, those who shattered the sacred bond of family. The animals chosen for the sack were not random, but laden with meaning. The dog symbolized shamelessness, the rooster arrogance, the monkey malice, and the viper venomous hatred. Together they formed a perverse menagerie, a new family for the condemned, replacing the ancestors he betrayed. As the historian Livy notes, the punishment aimed to isolate the parricide from creation itself. Denied burial on earth, breath in air, or purity in water, he was cast into oblivion. Imagine the condemned, his body bruised from the rods, hearing the animal's frantic cries as the sack is sewn shut. The crowd watches not with pity, but with grim satisfaction as the executioners hoist the writhing bundle to the river's edge. The splash echoes like a final judgment, the waters closing over the sack as it sinks. For the Romans, this was justice as theatre, a ritual that purged the stain of parricide from the community. The philosopher Cicero, arguing against a parricide, explained its logic. They want him to be unable to have sky, sun, water, or earth, so that he who killed the one who gave him life should be deprived of all those things from which all living things derive their life. The poena culae was a mirror of the crime, a punishment that matched betrayal with exclusion. One of the earliest recorded cases was Publilius Malleolus in 101 BCE, who murdered his mother. Livy records the hesitation of officials who consulted ancient customs to revive the long-dormant penalty. Malleolus, sealed in the sack, reportedly laughed as he faced his fate, declaring, "Today, I will achieve what philosophers strive for, to experience all elements at once." His defiance did not spare him. The Tiber claimed him at the Cestian Bridge, a site synonymous with this ritual. Emperor Claudius, witnessing a similar execution, was struck by its symbolism, seeing in the sack a reflection of Rome's moral order, where family betrayal was an affront to the gods. The punishment evolved over time. Early versions used only serpents, but by the Empire, the full menagerie became standard. Emperor Hadrian introduced leniency for mitigated cases, allowing drowning without animals, but the core symbolism remained. In regions lacking monkeys, wolves or bears were substituted as recorded in Justinian's Digest, ensuring the ritual's essence endured. The poena culae was rare, its horror so profound that its threat alone deterred crime. Yet when enacted, it was a public spectacle, drawing crowds to witness the expulsion of a traitor to Pietas. The emotional resonance of this punishment was visceral. For the condemned, the sack was a suffocating nightmare, the animal's claws and fangs a prelude to drowning. For spectators, it was a cathartic ritual reaffirming the sanctity of family in a society built on lineage. Yet the horror lingered. How could a civilization so grand devise such a fate? As historians, we see in the poena culae Rome's obsession with order, its willingness to orchestrate cruelty to protect its values. The sack was not just a punishment, but a story told in blood and water of a society that feared betrayal above all else. The legion stands in rigid silence, the air thick with dread, as soldiers clutch their clubs, faces pale under their helmets. Before them, a comrade kneels, his eyes wide with fear, knowing he drew the fatal lot. The centurion's voice cuts through the stillness, ordering the men to raise their weapons. With a sickening crunch, the fustuarium begins. Clubs and stones rain, down blood pooling on the earth. Nearby, another unit prepares for decimation, where 1 in 10 will face the same fate, chosen by chance to die at the hands of their brothers. This is Rome's military justice, a theater of terror that forged discipline through fear. As a historian, I invite you to stand among these soldiers to feel the horror of a system that turned comrades into executioners, binding loyalty with blood. In Rome's legions, discipline was paramount, and failure was equated with betrayal. The fustuarium, clubbing to death, was a punishment for deserters, cowards, or those who lost their weapons in battle. The process was ritualistic. The tribune lightly touched the condemned with a cudgel, signaling the legion to attack. The Roman writer Polybius described the scene. All the soldiers fall upon him with clubs and stones, usually killing him in the camp itself. Those who escaped were banished, forbidden to return home, their shame absolute. The fustuarium was public, its brutality a spectacle to deter others, ensuring that fear of punishment outweighed fear of the enemy. Decimation, even more chilling, was a collective punishment for legions guilty of cowardice or mutiny. Soldiers were divided into groups of 10, each drawing lots to determine who would die. The chosen one was beaten to death by his 9 comrades, a lottery of doom that made every soldier a potential victim or executioner. The historian Frontinus noted that decimated units often became Rome's fiercest fighters, desperate to erase their stigma. The psychological toll was immense. Survivors, forced to kill their brothers, carried the guilt and terror, their loyalty to Rome sealed in blood. The poet Lucan captured this horror. Chance became the arbiter of doom, and on the hazard of the lot depended death. One infamous instance occurred in 71 BCE during the Third Servile War. After a legion under Mummius was defeated by Spartacus's rebels, Marcus Licinius Crassus revived the ancient practice of decimation. 500 men chosen by lot were clubbed to death by their comrades, their screams echoing through the camp. This act, rare by the late Republic, was a stark reminder that failure was as grave as treason. Crassus's message was clear: disloyalty, even through incompetence, would meet a merciless end. The survivors, humiliated and fed barley instead of wheat, fought with renewed ferocity, their shame a spur to valor. The fustuarium was equally brutal. During the Second Punic War, when Rome faced Hannibal's onslaught, the consul Titus Manlius Torquatus ordered fustuarium for soldiers who fled battle. The punishment was so terrifying that, as the military writer Vegetius noted, the courage needed to face the enemy became less daunting than the certainty of death at the hands of one's comrades. In another case, the General Pompey, known for theatrical flair, ordered thieves in his army beaten to death with the shafts of military standards. Symbols of Roman honor turned into instruments of execution, amplifying the shame. The emotional impact was devastating. Imagine a soldier forced to strike his friend, the weight of the club heavy with betrayal. The crowd of legionaries watching their comrade's life end knew they could be next. This shared terror forged an unbreakable bond, but at a cost. Soldiers became complicit in Rome's cruelty, their humanity eroded by the act. Some, as Lucan recorded, formed blood pacts, vowing to die rather than kill their brothers, a desperate attempt to cling to honor in a dehumanizing system. As historians, we see in these punishments Rome's ruthless pragmatism. Decimation and fustuarium were not just about discipline, but about spectacle, transforming the camp into an arena where loyalty was tested. The Legio III Augusta, decimated after a poor performance in Numidia, later earned the title Emperor's Cudgel for its ferocity, proof of the punishment's efficacy. Yet the cost was a legion haunted by its own violence, its soldiers bound by fear as much as duty. In this brutal theater, Rome revealed its core, an empire built on order, enforced by terror, where even comrades could become instruments of death. In the heart of Rome's Forum, a statue topples, its marble face shattered on the cobblestones. Workers chisel a name from an inscription, each strike erasing a man's legacy. Coins bearing his likeness are melted, his will voided, his very name forbidden. This is damnatio memoriae, Rome's most insidious punishment, a fate worse than death oblivion. For a culture obsessed with legacy, where poets like Horace declared, "I shall not wholly die to be erased," was to lose immortality itself. As a historian, I invite you to stand amidst the dust of broken statues, to feel the chilling void of a punishment that sought to unmake a person, leaving only a ghost in Rome's memory. Damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, was reserved for those who betrayed Rome's core emperors, senators, or generals whose actions threatened the state. The Senate, with cold precision, ordered the destruction of statues, inscriptions, and records, erasing the condemned from history. Yet paradoxically, the act of erasure often preserved their notoriety, the conspicuous absence a testament to their crime. The historian Suetonius noted the Senate's glee at Emperor Domitian's death in 96 CE, when his statues were smashed, his name scratched from monuments and buildings tied to him razed. Archaeological evidence in the Forum still shows inscriptions, scarred by chisels, a silent witness to this deliberate oblivion. The emotional weight of this punishment was profound. Imagine a once powerful emperor like Domitian, whose name adorned arches and temples, now reduced to a shadow. His family, forbidden to speak his name, lived with the shame of his erasure. The poet Martial mocked such fallen figures, but the act was no jest. It was a cultural execution, stripping the condemned of their place in Rome's eternal story. Sculptors, anticipating such decrees, crafted statues with removable heads, a grim practicality for an empire where favor was fleeting. The historian Tacitus noted that even speaking ill of the emperor could warrant this fate, as the definition of treason expanded under imperial rule. One of the most poignant cases was Sejanus, the Praetorian prefect, who nearly seized power under Tiberius in 31 CE. After his fall, his statues were melted, their metal recast into mocking images of despised figures. His children, including a young daughter, were executed to end his bloodline. Tacitus records her heartbreaking plea, "What have I done? I won't do it again," as she was led to death unaware her existence was a threat. The thoroughness of Sejanus's erasure made his coup one of the best documented crises of the early empire, a cruel irony where the attempt to obliterate preserved his infamy. The psychological terror of damnatio memoriae lay in its permanence. Physical death was fleeting, but to be erased from Rome's collective memory was to lose one's place among the ancestors, a fate Romans feared more than the grave. Emperor Commodus, strangled in 192 CE, suffered this penalty for his erratic rule, though his successor Septimius Severus later reversed it, showing the impermanence of such decrees in Rome's shifting politics. Yet the scars remained, defaced. Inscriptions recarved busts a city haunted by its own attempts to forget. For the living, the punishment was a warning. Senators and citizens witnessing the destruction of a once revered figure knew their own legacy hung by a thread. The crowd, in the forum watching workers deface a monument, felt the weight of Rome's judgment betray the state, and you ceased to exist. This communal act of erasure bound society together, reinforcing loyalty through fear. Yet it also revealed Rome's fragility, a civilization so obsessed with memory that it weaponized its absence. As historians, we see in Damnatio Memoriae a paradox: the effort to erase often etched the condemned deeper into history. The gaps in inscriptions, the melted coins, speak louder than the names they removed. Rome's attempt to control memory mirrors its obsession with power, a reminder that even in oblivion, the condemned left traces. The poet Virgil, in his Aeneid, described traitors suffering in the underworld, their names forgotten by the living. Yet in Damnatio Memoriae, we glimpse Rome's true fear that betrayal could unravel its eternal story, leaving only silence where glory once stood. The stagnant pond reflects a merciless sun, its surface buzzing with insects drawn to the honey-smeared figure trapped between two boats. The condemned, force-fed milk and honey writhes in agony as flies and wasps consume his flesh, his screams muffled by the suffocating heat. This is scaphism, a torture so vile it was rarely used its mere threat enough to break the defiant. Elsewhere, in a darkened chamber beneath Rome's Colline Gate, a Vestal Virgin is sealed alive, her lamp flickering as the air dwindles. This is the Collegium Tenebrarum live burial, a punishment that weaponized humanity's primal fear of darkness. As a historian, I invite you to confront these horrors, to feel the despair of Rome's most terrifying punishments, where body and soul were pushed to the edge of oblivion. Scaphism, borrowed from the Persians, was a grotesque spectacle of slow death. The condemned was bound between two boats, or hollow logs with only head, hands, and feet protruding. Force-fed milk and honey to induce diarrhea, their body was coated in. Honey to attract insects. Left afloat on a fetid pond, they endured putrefaction while a live death creeping over days or even weeks. The historian Plutarch recounts the execution of the soldier Mithridates, who survived an astonishing 17 days, his body a living ruin. In Rome, scaphism was reserved for sacrilege or betrayal of military secrets, crimes deemed a threat to the community. Emperor Macrinus in 217 CE used it on corrupt officials, declaring they should experience the consequences of their own filth. The psychological horror was unmatched. Imagine the condemned trapped in their own excrement, insects burrowing into their skin, unable to move. The crowd, if present, watched with a mix of revulsion and fascination, the spectacle reinforcing Rome's power to punish beyond death. During Emperor Valerian's persecution of Christians in the 3rd century, the Deacon Sanctus of Carthage endured a modified scaphism, his honey-covered body burned with hot plates while insects swarmed. His stoic response, "I am a Christian," so unnerved his torturers that they beheaded him instead. The Roman writer Vegetius noted that merely describing scaphism could extract confessions, its terror a deterrent in itself. The Collegium Tenebrarum, or live burial, was equally chilling. Most often inflicted on Vestal virgins, who broke their vows of chastity, a crime seen as inviting divine wrath. The condemned was dressed in funeral attire, carried in a covered litter to the Campus Sceleratus, and sealed in a small underground chamber with a lamp bed and minimal food. This legal fiction, abandonment rather than execution, preserved the prohibition against directly harming a sacred priestess. Archaeological finds near the Colline Gate reveal chambers with female skeletons, oil lamps, and decayed food silent witnesses to this grim ritual. The case of Cornelia Chief Vestal in 91 CE is heart-wrenching. Condemned by Emperor Domitian despite proclaiming her innocence, she maintained perfect dignity, recoiling when an executioner offered his hand as she descended to her tomb. Pliny the Younger, who witnessed her procession, recorded her words, "Caesar thinks I am unchaste, I who performed sacred rites while he triumphed." Trapped in darkness, she faced a slow death by starvation or suffocation, forced to choose between, prolonging her agony or ending it swiftly. The philosopher Lucretius described this as humanity's deepest fear, the deep darkness of death, a terror Rome weaponized with chilling precision. For others, like conspirators in the Catiline plot of 63 BCE, live burial took place in Tulliola chambers beneath the Tullianum prison, so cramped the victim could barely stand. The existential horror, entombed with no escape, oxygen fading, made this punishment uniquely terrifying. For Romans, it was not just death, but a symbolic expulsion from the world, a purification of the community's moral stain. As historians, we see in Scaphism and Collegium Tenebrarum Rome's mastery of fear. These punishments, rare but potent, reflected a society that balanced justice with spectacle, using horror to enforce order. The poet Seneca warned that some punishments satisfied anger rather than justice, a truth embodied in these extremes. In their shadows we glimpse Rome's soul, a civilization that built wonders but wielded terror to protect them, its legacy a haunting reminder of the cost of power.